Hi, welcome to my presentation. Today I'm going to be discussing my conclusion, which is how Mesopotamian religious beliefs would strongly influence the development of monotheism, especially in Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Christianity, and Manichaeism. So, first we have the god Enlil that I'd like to discuss, who's the Sumerian father of the gods. He's king of kings, or king of heaven and earth, and he's feared due to his very destructive nature. He's always killing someone. But he's still loved as the guardian of Sumer. And this reminds me a lot of the God in the Old Testament. He was very vindictive, but he was also loved. Next we have Marduk, the Babylonian god of heaven and earth, and we have Ashtar, the Assyrian god of gods in heaven and earth. And the reason I want to point these out is because although they're more henotheistic, they're really on the road to monotheism. So, Mesopotamian myths would have a major impact on Judeo-Christian traditions and creation myths. For example, Sargon the Great's birth can be compared to the birth of Moses and of Jesus of Nazareth. They're both divine and of a virgin, and even the legacy can be felt in the Gospel of Matthew with his tale of Magi, where a star is followed to the newborn baby Jesus by the three wise men coming from the east. So, now, Nebuchadnezzar built his 7-story ziggurat, right? And this is thought to be the inspiration for the Old Testament story of the Tower of Babel. Not only do you have that, but you have the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Babylonian epic, and this is very much like Noah and the Ark. You even have a character who's a proto-Noah. His name is Utnapishtim. He's exactly like Noah. So I'm just going to jump to the end of this epic to make my point. So, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh is trying to seek immortality, and he finds out that there's this awesome immortality plant, and you have to dive to the bottom of the ocean, and you have to rip it up, and it can cut your hands off and do all these terrible things. But he does it. He goes on this arduous journey, and he does it, and he brings the plant up to the surface, and instead of going right for the shore, he inexplicably decides to sit down for a leisurely bath. And what happens is that a serpent comes up, and the serpent eats his immortality plant, thus becoming immortal. Okay? I think this is really interesting because you see the snake as the antagonist. Later in Christianity, you see it in the second in Genesis 2, in the second creation myth in the New Testament, where the serpent provokes Eve into eating the apple. Also, here the snake becomes immortal, and evil is supposed to be sort of immortal, and that's what makes this struggle sort of forever between good and evil. So, I want to talk about Zoroastrian next. So, Zoroastrianism, was created by Zarathustra in the 6th century, coming out of Persia. And he would bring with him his god Ahura Mazda and the struggle of man, man's free will, and the struggle between good and evil. So we have free will to choose, and good and evil, which all sounds pretty familiar. This, of course, includes a very ethical idea of religion, because you're dealing with man's free will to choose. So, Zoroaster banned a lot of celebrations and sacrifices that included what was called heoma, or displays of drunkenness or overt sexuality, and so a lot of rituals were banned. He repressed a lot of natural, pleasurable human activities and called them evil. If you didn't have the wherewithal to control yourself, then you're probably going to go to hell, or you were on the wrong path. Okay, so another important fact is that out of Indo-Persia, there were these two types of gods, or spirits, and they were the Devas and the Asuras. And the Devas would represent the heavenly spirits, and the Asura would represent the occult powers. And as this became more solidified, this idea in Mesopotamia, they went through a switch. The Devas became the evil, and the Asuras became the good. And here you also almost see angels, devils, and good and bad, more solidifying this struggle in a tangible sort of way, Now, Ahura Mazda would become, in Mesopotamia, the primary god of all gods of heaven and earth, and of course moral order. People who would choose to follow Ahura Mazda would be considered following the wise lord, and they would be rewarded in the afterlife with immortality, which to me is a lot like the Christian idea of immortality through the acceptance of Christ. You're immortal through Christ when you get to heaven if you've been good. Now, the people who didn't follow Ahura Mazda were considered following the lie, and they would be damned to something in the afterlife very akin to a Christian hell. And this is interesting to me because Satan, especially in Christianity, is referred to as the father of all lies. So, next up we have the Sassanids. And this is important because they were the ones to really jump on this idea of linear time. And you have to have linear time if you're going to have your Messiah come at the end, to have this struggle between good and evil, on Earth. So they had 4 major time periods. The first 2 were the struggle between good and evil. The third was when a savior or Messiah would come to Earth and lead the people and forces of good to triumph over evil. And the fourth was a judgment day where the bodies of the dead would rise. And here you see the end of days in the Christian Bible. You also see in the Old Testament, the Jewish Messiah would come down, and he would do something called tzaddikim, and that was when he would revive the dead, but only the chosen ones, only the people who really deserved it. And their end of times was called Ahared Hayam, and it was in the Tanakh, and so it's very well documented. The final one is Manichaeism. This is where the world would be divided into light and dark, and this is great because this brings us full circle. Mani, who invented Manichaeism, was a preacher from Mesopotamia, and he went to great lengths to really create this extreme version of Zoroastrianism. And according to Manichaeism, if you did anything pleasurable at all, which was like your innate desire to do something, then you were absolutely going to hell. You were against the light, and you were following into the dark. And this was very, very popular, and I think that's probably because people felt very safe within the confines and these specific boundaries. There wasn't ambiguity. You knew exactly what you needed to do and not do in order to get to heaven. I think this is really important because St. Augustine, who wrote, of course, City of God that we discussed in our book, was Manichaean before he became a Christian. He was hell-bent on decriminalizing the Christians because they were being persecuted as the reason why Rome fell by the pagans and the Romans. And so he wrote City of God to sort of to show how he felt about the whole thing. Okay, so there we have it. I think this really brings it full circle. I think it, it really shows us that, you have Manichaeism, which goes all the way back to Mesopotamia, and then brings us all the way back to Christianity. One of the most prolific Christian figures was Manichaean. So thank you very much for listening to my oral presentation. Have a good day.